The Sonic series seems to have a lot of playable characters in it. I mean a lot of playable characters. I mean a lot of playable characters. It only makes sense. The Sonic series has been going strong since 1991, and since then over 80 different playable characters have been introduced. So that'd be fun to go through and just talk about every single one of these characters. We're going to be talking about them from least amount of appearances to most amount of appearances in alphabetical order. Some of these characters are going to be grouped together though, and you'll see why here in a minute. Really the only rules we need to go over is that there are no alternate forms of characters. Like, we're not counting Sonic, Super Sonic, and Classic Sonic as separate characters. They're all just Sonic. We're only looking at official Sonic games, no matter how obscure or weird the playable characters may be. You will be seeing some characters counted from the Mario and Sonic games or the Sonic and Sega racing games, but we'll only be counting the Sonic characters we see in those games. So for example, we're not counting the Heavy from Team Fortress 2 on the list, even though they're in Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed. There won't be any collections talked about here since it would really just benefit Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, and finally all the ports of a game are grouped together for convenience sake. If you enjoy the video, then don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If there are any characters that I missed or games that I forgot, just let me know in the comments below. Also, I want to know who your favorite character to play in the series is. Honestly, for me, I'll always be picking Mephiles whenever I can. He's just such a cool character to me, and I love his design. But anyways, with that, let's take a look at all the playable characters in the Sonic series. Starting with the animals from Sonic's Schoolhouse. The animals, those being elephant, alligator, cow, pig, hippopotamus, rabbit, kangaroo, polar bear, zebra, and monkey, are all selectable avatars you could choose to play as throughout your learning adventure. The only thing these characters seem to do is have whatever animal you select appear on the bottom of your screen, and after you solve some of the problems the character you chose will appear on screen. You can see all the characters if you ever decide to go on the bus, so that's kinda cool I guess, but other than that, there isn't really too much to say on these guys. Bark the Polar Bear and Bean the Dynamite are being thrown together here because they both only have one playable appearance, and that of course is of 1996's Sonic the Fighters. While Bean usually uses explosives to attack, Bark is much more of a physical fighter, relying on his strength alone to win battles. Although they have made cameos throughout the years, they haven't had any chance to take any part in a playable role, which is unfortunate for these two. The fan favorite Barry's only game was in The Murder of Sonic the Hedgehog, a visual novel released by the Sonic social media team back in 2023. It was created as an April Fool's joke, but it's become a favorite of mine for just how silly and goofy it all is. I won't spoil how it ends if you haven't played it yet, but Barry is just the official name given to the avatar character you play as in this game. The fan favorites of Knuckles, Chaotix, Heavy, and Bomb have surprisingly only been in one game. For some reason, Sega has never wanted to bring them back into future titles or even acknowledge this game's existence at times. Bomb and Heavy are both robots created by Robotnik, who abandoned Robotnik to work with Knuckles and his team to stop the Doctor from succeeding in his evil schemes. There isn't too much known about these two, but the wiki says they're best friends, so I'll take their word for it. Chaos Gamma is a recreation of the fan favorite E102 Gamma from Sonic Adventure, but this robot was built with a specific purpose in mind: retrieve Emerald for Dr. Eggman. In the story mode of Sonic Battle, you're unable to play as them, but it's only after beating the game that you can play as the character. I don't really know too much about this character, so let's just move on. The first character in this list to be brought over into the games from other media, Chaos Sonic is a robotic version of Sonic from the Sonic Prime TV show. He's basically all of Sonic's emotions and features but heightened. His only playable appearance has been in the official Sonic game Sonic Speed Simulator on Roblox. All the characters in Sonic Speed Simulator are essentially the same, but some of them have special abilities like Chaos Sonic having a magnet ability able to pull in rings from further away. So this is actually one I didn't know until working on this video, but Orbot and Cubot are playable in a Sonic game. Not just a side game, but for Sonic Lost World specifically on the Wii U version of the game. In the Circus minigame is just about popping balloons and collecting rings, usually playing this game as Sonic and Tails. Well, if you play the minigame while Tails is captured by the Zeddy, Orbot or Cubot will take his place. It's crazy to me I didn't know this was a feature in the game. As the leader of the E10000G model of robots, E10000R has a ton of responsibilities, like taking an accidental beating from both Knuckles and Storm, both who are just trying to hit each other. All in all, this robot is just another playable character for you to choose as in Sonic Riders, as it doesn't really put up too much of a fight in any of the cutscenes it appears in. The backwards hat on it does look pretty cool though. Emerald has always been a super intriguing character for me to learn about, but all of his lore is tied into one Game Boy Advance game of which I don't own, and also if I did own it, I would have no way to play it since I don't own a Game Boy Advance. My own personal issues aside though, Emerald is a character who only appears in Sonic Battle and is a robot that was built to seemingly mimic others' actions to perfection. Its whole gameplay style in Sonic Battle is just customizing based on actions that the other playable characters can perform. It's only in this game, but even 22 years later, Emerald is still a fan favorite who gets brought up in a lot of conversations these days. So I don't know if there's an official name for this guy, but a lot of people call him Feels, so that's what we're going with. The only game he appears in is Sonic Superstars and is a skin that you can select over Sonic. This is because Feels was one of Sonic's original designs before it was ultimately changed to a blue hedgehog instead of a light blue rabbit. Other than that though, we don't really know too much about this character. Gemerald is a robot created by Dr. Eggman built using Emerald's data as a base, which is why it looks so similar in design to Emerald. Along with Dr. Eggman, Gemerald is one of the main antagonists in Sonic Advance 3, and you actually need to team up with Dr. Eggman to defeat him at the end of this game. Since that battle, Gemerald was reprogrammed to be a lot more like Emerald. His only playable appearance is in Sonic Speed Simulator. So, Honey the Cat is a weird character. Her only playable appearance is in Sonic the Fighters, but not the original release of the game. She's only playable in the 2012 re-release of the game for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. The only way to play as her is to press the start button while hovering over Amy. All we really know about her is that she owns some sort of fashion company, but that's about it. She was in the original game's code, almost complete, but it looks like she just barely missed the cut. Another one-off character in a one-off game, King Arthur is the main antagonist in Sonic and the Black Knight. While you can't play as him in the main campaign of the game, you can play as him in the game's battle mode. The thing is, you can't just play as him right after beating the story. You need to collect all 5 of the Arthur's Legends books. These can be found while IDing items at the end of every mission. It's super cool when games let you play as the antagonist in the game. My only wish is that there was some way you could play as him in the main story of the game. Oh Maria, you're no Eggman. Maria's only playable appearance is in the game's Shadow the Hedgehog. If you're doing the hero mission for either the Doom or Lost Impact, you'll have Maria following Shadow throughout the level. If a second controller is then plugged in, the second player can control Maria. This goes the same for most of the other characters in this game, unless they're Black Doom or Eggman. She doesn't really do much, but it's still neat that you can play as her. This grouping is a little weird, so let me explain. The Metal Fighters are a group of bipedal robots created by Dr. Robotnik, and we see them in Sonic Superstars. We can see them in the Cyber Station Zone boss fight, and if any of you happen to go into the battle mode of this game, you would see that you're able to customize your Metal Fighter and even play as them in some of the games online with other people. It is something to note that the Metal Sonic and Metal Knuckles parts you could put on these robots aren't the actual Metal Sonic and Metal Knuckles, just replicas. Honestly, they're pretty forgetful, but they're playable, so I had to mention them. Speaking of Metal Knuckles, it and the Tails doll are next on our list with their only playable appearance being in Sonic R all the way back in 1997. The Robotniks designed by Robotnik to help collect the Chaos Emeralds, but like always, they failed. There isn't too much backstory to these guys, but those Sonic Paradox videos definitely made me terrified of the Tails doll. If you've seen the video, you know what I'm talking about. Moving away from robots to a living, breathing creature, the Pockeys are one of the playable characters that we see in the Mario and Sonic Tokyo 2020 Olympic Games. They serve as teammates for Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles during the volleyball event. We can see some of the other critters in the background from Sonic's adventures, but the Pockeys are the only ones who we ever get to play as in an actual Sonic game. I mean, it only took them 29 years, but they still made it, and that's all that counts. And we're right back to robots with the RC vehicles from Sonic Lost World. Yet another thing I didn't know about Lost World is that apparently it has a co-op mode. If a second player connects to the game during the main campaign, they can control a little RC vehicle that all do different things during gameplay. Outside of the main game though, they didn't really do anything. I promise we're almost done with robots on this list, but first we need to talk about the SCR GP and the SCR HD. Both of these robots were built by Eggman and used to help with some scheme in Sonic Riders Zero Gravity. They look very similar, the only difference between the two seems to be eye color, and that the SCR HD has some little ear looking thing at the top of his head. While playing as them in Zero Gravity, they both curl into a ball and when they move fast enough, so that's pretty cool I guess. Shade the Echidna, leader of the Maridar forces. Her only playable appearance is in the not so critically acclaimed Sonic Chronicles for the DS. She's a power type character in the game, meaning she focuses a lot more on attacking enemies than helping her team out. After this game and the lawsuit that followed, we never got to see her or any of the other characters from this game ever again, which is really sad for all 5 of the Shade fans out there. The newest character on this list, Trip the Sungazer, is a resident of the North Star Islands. She was hired by Dr. Robotnik and Fang to help guide the two through the lands of the North Star Islands, until she eventually turned against them and joined up with Sonic and his friends. I believe she's the only character that has a super form that drastically changes her outward appearance. I mean, Sonic turns all gold and can fly, but Trip turns into a literal dragon, and that's awesome. If I'm wrong though, just let me know in the comments below. And for our final one-off playable appearance is Xena, a member of the Deadly Six who inhabits the Lost Hex. Surprisingly, her only playable appearance isn't in Lost World, or even in one of the Olympic Games, but in Sonic Force's Speed Battle. She was added back in December of 2019, and that's really all the amount of brainpower I care to spend on her. From here on out, all the characters on the list have 2 or more playable appearances in a Sonic game. If you're enjoying the video so far, leaving a like and subscribing would be really appreciated. Thanks everyone, and let's get on with it. Now, we're just gonna call this guy Avatar, since he's just a customizable avatar character. His only notable appearances are in Sonic Forces and Sonic Rumble. In Forces, you can customize the avatar however you may please with different species, outfits, and weapons. In Rumble though, there are just a set amount of avatars that you can select, all with predetermined species and outfits with no customization. I always thought the avatar character was cool in Sonic Forces, I just wish it was a part of a better game, that's all. So Eggpawns have been appearing in Sonic games ever since Sonic Heroes in 2003, and finally 14 years later they get their playable debut in Mario and Sonic at the Rio 2016 Olympic Games. There are a number of different events that these guys can be playable in, but just as supporting characters. I think it's really cool that you get to play as characters who are outside of the main Sonic cast, and it's really cool being able to play as all those Eggman's robots. Fang the Hunter, Fang the Sniper, Neck the Weasel, Jet the Jerboa, whatever you want to call him, is a thief known for all of his aliases. While making several appearances as an antagonist over the years, he hasn't been in any sort of playable role since the 90s. He's only playable in a racing game made for the Sega Game Gear, and a fighting game that was an arcade exclusive in 2012 when it was ported to the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3. I like him as a character, but gosh, that boss fight in Superstars was so annoying. Infinite is a strange character. He's a one-off villain who's only playable in 2 very similar mobile games, and in his main game, he's not even upset with Sonic, he just wants to get revenge on Shadow for beating him to a pulp and calling him weak. I think if he ever does decide to make a reappearance in a mainline game or spin-off, it definitely should focus on him and Shadow instead of him and Sonic. Other than that, I think he's got a really cool design, and I love his theme song. Longclaw is our only Movieverse character on our list, and like Infinite, she's only playable in Sonic Dash and Sonic Forces Speed Battle. We don't really know much about her besides that she was Sonic's caregiver when he was young, and her kind helped with hiding the Master Emerald from the Echidna clan in the movies. That's really it. Shadow's metal copies, the Shadow androids, only pop up twice throughout the games, which is understandable. They're playable in the battle modes of Shadow the Hedgehog and unlockable characters in Sonic Speed Simulator. We don't know too much about them besides they were mass-produced by Eggman as a replacement for the real Shadow. The fan favorite Surge the Tenric got the Sonic Dash and Speed Battle treatment as well. If you don't know who she is, she's a character introduced in the IDW comics as sort of a parallel to Sonic. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like Kit made the cut for these games, but maybe they'll come in some future updates to these games someday. We can only hope. Bray the Flying Squirrel, probably my favorite character to play as in Sonic Mania, only makes 2 playable appearances, those being in the arcade exclusive Sega Sonic the Hedgehog and Sonic Mania's expansion Sonic Mania Plus, where we can see both him and Mighty trapped in a cage in the game's Encore mode. We get to free them both from the cage, although the one you don't end up talking to first is actually just the heavy magician in disguise. Now I know I said different forms were off the table for this video, but the virtual hedgehog isn't really Sonic, but just a Sonic lookalike that you can play as in Gameland's Sonic Simulator and Sonic Colors, or just in Lost World's 2-player versus mode. They look like Sonic but have an antenna on them and are different colors. Other than that, yeah, they play the exact same as Sonic and there isn't anything really cool about them. Like Surge, Whisper is also only playable in Sonic Dash and Speed Battle. She's not really any different from the other characters in the mobile games, but it's cool that the games are starting to bring over more and more character from the movies and comics, even if the games are just mobile games. We're glad she's here, now we're just hoping she makes it to an official game soon. Here's to hoping she's in Sonic Racing Crossworlds. The God of Destruction Chaos made a big splash in Sonic Adventure, and his playable appearance followed shortly in the game's sequel where he was delegated to the multiplayer mode. He's a treasure hunter character like Rouge and Knuckles, but unlike those two, he's like a billion times cooler. Other than that appearance, you could play as him in Sonic Battle and unlock him in Sonic Forces Speed Battle. Now if only we could have fought against him in Forces. Rounding out the E10000 series of robots is E10000G. Now, for some reason, he was the only E10000 series robot to be brought into Sonic Speed Simulator. I just know everyone was dying to play as this character. But anyways, it gets its playable debut in Sonic Riders just like E10000R, but they also appear in Sonic Free Riders along E10000B, who's just actually Metal Sonic in disguise. Eggman Nega appeared in both Rush games, then was also in both Rivals games, dies, then shows up again 9 years later to participate in the Olympics. Like, what the heck, dude? If you don't know who this guy is, he's Eggman Descendant and he's evil. That's literally all we know about him. Oh, and I guess also he likes to participate in the Olympics. Egg Robo is a fun character. By far one of Eggman's most distinctive looking robots. They pop up a lot throughout the classic games, and apparently like racing because that's where 2 of their 3 playable appearances come from. Other than that, it's just a cool robot. If you want to know where they play a role in the Olympic Games though, they're Eggman's teammates in volleyball. Very notable playable appearances indeed. By far the most tragic loss in the series, E102 Gamma is a character that a lot of people hold close to their heart. After their touching story in Sonic Adventure, in which they blow up after getting shot point blank, Gamma has popped up a couple times throughout the years, but none of them have been the real thing. I think I speak for a lot of us when I say although that Gamma's passing away ultimately led to a Flicky reuniting with its family, I still wish he could appear in games today. I will say, Omega is way cooler than Gamma ever could have been though. While his playable appearances are only delegated to mobile games, Mephiles the Dark is still one of the most memorable Sonic characters we've seen to date. In his first non-playable appearance, he did what no one else has done before and killed Sonic. And in his latest non-playable appearance, all he wants is to exist, but Shadow doesn't let him in one of the coolest boss fights ever. I really hope he appears in another game someday, but I know it's just merely a pipe dream. Mighty the Armadillo. Although he's in the exact same games as Ray, he decided to take up a job with the Chaotix once and leave Ray out of all the fun. I mean, honestly, I don't think Ray was really missing much. The Chaotix game is kind of boring and can get repetitive after a while. I don't really share the same feelings for Mighty that I have with Ray, but I do hope he can appear in more classic games in the future. His moveset is fun to play with, and he just has a really nice design that I think is on par or slightly better than most of the classic cast. Now this is super interesting. Even though Omochao has been appearing in a ton of Sonic games since the late 90s, their only 3 playable appearances are kart racers. The first of these is Sonic Adventure 2's kart racing side game, and only in the Dreamcast version of the game. By downloading the Appa Appa Kart Racing VMU from the game's North American website, you can race as Omochao, who drives a kart that is shaped like an Appa Appa from the game Fantasy Zone. The other, less interesting games are just Team Sonic Racing and Sonic Racing. In Team Sonic Racing, Omochao is one of the characters on Team Rose. They teamed up with the Dark, Hero, and Neutral Chao in both of these games. But we'll talk about the Chao later in this list, don't you worry. Similar to Chaos, Tikal's only playable appearances are in side modes of games or mobile games that get over 500 million downloads somehow. Like Chaos, she only has one notable appearance in a mainline title, that being as a floating ball of light that sometimes takes people back in time to watch her family murder a bunch of children. But she does it all for a good reason. I know there isn't a place for her to exist in the current day of Sonic's world, but I'd like to see her come back in some shape or form. I mean, if Eggman Nega can, why can't she? Tango is the final character in this list to make it over from the comics. She isn't really different from any of the other characters in the mobile games, mainly because you just move back and forth at a set speed and use items. But it is super cool that the games are starting to bring over more and more characters from the movies and comics, even if the games are just mobile games. She also is a character you can play as in Sonic Speed Simulator if that helps. Anything really counts for these guys. For being in a majority of Sonic games since their introduction in 1998, the Chao have only made 4 notable playable appearances. 2 of those times were right at the turn of the century back in 2000, and the other 2 were before the turn of the decade in 2019. I'm grouping all the Chao together here since I don't want to have separate entries for the Hero, Dark, and Neutral variants of these guys. The Chao are really cute creatures, and seeing them operate big mechs in Sonic Adventure 2 or giant cars in Team Sonic Racing is just so funny to me, especially when the Dark Chao Walker has an attack called Hell Bomber. Zaz must be some kind of Olympic athlete if he keeps running it back every 4 years. He's also been an antagonist at least twice in the games, once in Sonic Lost World and the other in Sonic Dash. Being a member of the Deadly Six, a group of Zeddy who live on a planet called the Lost Hex, Jazz taunts the player in Lost World and you easily defeat him without much trouble. I do really like his giant yellow ball he rides on though, which I learned is actually called the Moon Mech. I mean, it makes sense. It looks like the moon, except it's just really bright yellow, and it's mechanical. Perfect naming scheme right there if I do say so myself. Now it's time for nobody's favorite loud, fourth wall breaking badger, Styx. Now what's interesting about her playable appearance history is that she's in every single game released in between Sonic Boom Shattered Crystal and Sonic Boom Fire and Ice, but then after that, she's just like done. Like outside of one mention of her from Amy and Frontiers, she's just been out of the picture. Storm the Albatross, the brawn of the Babylon Rogues trio. He's the first one to appear on this list and actually has the lowest number of playable appearances so far out of the other Babylon Rogues, which only makes sense. He only appears in Writers games and you can choose him in Sonic Forces Speed Battle and Sonic Speed Simulator. Although he's usually part of the antagonists in every Writers game, his goals usually align with the heroes at the end of the day, and you're allowed to play as him. Following Storm is one of his associates, Wave the Swallow. For some reason, her and Jet were invited to the Olympics in 2016, but Storm was left out. Like Storm, Wave is antagonistic for most of the story in the Sonic Riders trilogy of games, but once she decides to change her mind, you can play as her. She's the brain of the Babylon Rogues, and I believe she built the extreme gear they ride on, but I'm not too certain. The leader of the Deadly Six finally decides to rear his ugly head on this list. Zavok has only been playable in racing and Olympic games, but also he's in Sonic Rumble for some reason. Like, I could literally name 10 other characters from this alone that I'd want to see in Sonic Rumble over Zavok. But that's beside the point. Zavok is a giant red monster who can enlarge his whole body somehow. I really don't even know how he does this. It's crazy, honestly. Our favorite top secret disc collector and the youngest member of Team Chaotix, Charmy is the least playable of the 3 members of Team Chaotix by quite a large margin. First appearing in Knuckles Chaotix as a 16-year-old, he's been aged down by quite a significant margin. We haven't really seen him in a mainline game since Sonic Heroes, which was over 20 years ago, but he's appeared in every mobile game for the most part, so Sega hasn't totally forgotten about him. Yet. Jumping all the way up to 11 playable appearances, Jet the Hawk is the leader of the Babylon Rogues, and finishes out the trio in the games that they make playable appearances in. He's basically Sonic, but instead of being a master of the ground, he's a master of the skies. He's also a thief who steals, so I guess he's not like Sonic in that department either. Anyways, I like him, he's cool, go play Sonic Riders if you can. Starting with Omega here, the rest of the characters we see in this list are playable in almost every side game you can think of. Racing, Olympics, mobile, whatever it may be, these final characters are most likely in them in some form or another. Okay, sorry, back to Omega now. Eggman's coolest and funniest robot ever. He was made to protect Shadow's capsule in Sonic Heroes, but he felt like his talents were being wasted on guarding what was practically a tomb. He gained a resentment towards Eggman, and from that point forward, his sole mission was to destroy the Eggman Empire. Dude was so mad that it's literally just his whole personality now, and I wouldn't want it any other way. If you ask a Sonic fan in the early 2010s who their least favorite Sonic character was, they would say Big the Cat. You would not believe how many fan animations painted this dude as a creep or just an idiot. It was insane. But looking at how he acts in game, his personality revolves around catching Froggy or going fishing. He seems to be really intelligent when he speaks. Looking at his dialect in Shadow Generations, he seems to be a smart guy. He was just painted in a really negative light for the fans in the first few games he was playable in for some reason. Another member of the Chaotix, Espio is a ninja who can turn invisible and even change color. First appearing in Knuckles Chaotix, Espio seems to be the Sonic character that they use if they ever need a character who's similar in stature to Sonic. Oh, you need another character in a fighting game? Espio. You need someone in a racing game that has characters raced on foot? Espio. Sonic Heroes has been his one and only mainline game, but other than that, he's just been invited to the Olympics or is in mobile games. Hey, look at that! It's Cream the Rabbit! Cream was first introduced to us in Sonic Advance 2, and seemed to be a really prominent figure for the next couple of years, appearing in Sonic Advance 3, Sonic Heroes, and even in Sonic Battle. After the era of the Game Boy Advance and GameCube though, she was demoted to only be playable in side games. However, she did see a major playable appearance in Sonic Dream Team for Apple Arcade, so maybe the future is looking up for this young rabbit. Rouge the Bat, everyone's favorite female Sonic character for some reason, has appeared in quite a lot of games since her introduction all the way back in 2001's Sonic Adventure 2. She's only been playable in a couple of the mainline titles following SA2, but it seems like she's been a part of every racing or mobile game released since her introduction. She's got a fierce attitude, and no one will get in the way of her hunting for some precious jewels. But there's also another character that shares the same number of appearances as her. That being Vector. He's in a similar boat as Rouge, not by being everyone's favorite female Sonic character, but he just appears in a lot of weird and random games. Like in Sonic Dash 2 Sonic Boom, there's all the main characters we see in and play as in the games, but then Vector is just here for some reason. If you don't know who he is, he's the final member and leader of Team Chaotix. He's got a love for money, and according to Knuckles Chaotix, a devout Christian. The boy from the tragic future, Silver the Hedgehog, follows up Vector with 22 playable appearances. Although he seemed to be hated in the mid-2000s for being in a game that almost killed the Sonic franchise the first time, Silver is actually playable in a lot of spin-off or side games. You usually unlock him as a character after beating the main campaign, or he's only playable in the game's battle mode. We haven't really gotten a chance to see him use his awesome psychic powers outside of a couple of cutscenes throughout the series, but I'm hopeful he can make a return one day and show us just how cool his psychic powers really are. If you don't want to wait for that though, then just go play Project 06. It's amazing and does Silver so much justice. Although her beginnings were a bit confusing from a continuity standpoint, Blaze is one of Sonic's coolest companions in the whole series. With her fire powers and being from another dimension, she blasts through levels almost as fast as Sonic does. She's been delegated to a lot of spin-off and side games after the Sonic Rush duology, but if there is one character I would like to see in another mainline series game, or even just a spin-off game of, Blaze the Cat would definitely be a top contender. For being the main antagonist 99% of the time, Dr. Eggman is only playable in one mainline title, that being Sonic Adventure 2. Other than that, he's just decided to become an Olympic athlete and an amazing race car driver. I guess he was also playable in Sonic Advance 3, but only during the final boss, and it was both him and Sonic together, not just him by himself. Besides that though, he has played a major role in almost every Sonic game out there, and I really wish there was another game where we got to see his plans unfolding like we see in Sonic Adventure 2. Being the star pupil he is, Metal Sonic is playable in literally the same amount of games that Dr. Eggman is in, which is crazy. He was created by the Doctor all the way back at Sonic CD to be lifeless in the same way that Sonic is full of life. His speed and strength match that of the Blue Blurs, and he's even been the main antagonist of a game all the way back at Sonic Heroes. We haven't really seen him in an antagonistic role since Sonic 4 Episode 2, but he is a boss fight in the newly released Shadow Generations. Other than that, he's just been cast aside to side games and mobile games. The ultimate life form Shadow the Hedgehog has made so many playable appearances, it's hard to figure out what he isn't playable in. Like seriously, post Sonic Adventure 2, there's only like 10 games he isn't in. Those being adventures Sonic takes on his own with no multiplayer mode, the Advance Trilogy, or the Boom series of games. He's one of the most iconic characters in this whole series, was the star of the recently released Sonic Movie 3, and has even gotten 2 whole games centered around him. Only 3 other characters in the series can say that they've gotten a game with their name in the title, not including Sonic. Shadow's a pretty big deal, and the Sonic series would not be the same without him. Amy started out as Sonic's #1 fangirl, but over the years, she slowly regressed in her love for Sonic. At least, how much she shows it. Her first playable appearance was actually in Sonic Drift, but ever since then, she's been running around with the main trio of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles for most of their adventures. She even had a somewhat large role in Sonic Superstars, helping Trip out and showing her that not everyone is mean and hurtful, but there are those who genuinely want to help out those in need. She's one of the original characters, is vital to the series, and I hope they eventually get around to adding her into the movies at some point. The one who doesn't chuckle, Knuckles the Echidna is the sole guardian of the Master Emerald, a magical emerald that rests on Angel Island, a floating island high in the skies. Being introduced in Sonic 3, Knuckles has been in literally every game that isn't a Sonic and Tails solo adventure. He's nearly as recognizable as Sonic and also one of his greatest rivals. Although Sonic Team gave him a lobotomy back in the 2010s, they seem to have repaired most of his brain, so he's no longer just a walking idiot, but a strong and confident rival who pushes those around him to be the best version of themselves they can be. Tails is Sonic's best friend, and he's been running by his side ever since 1992. He and Sonic have shared plenty of adventures over the years, but was the star of 2 games all the way back in the 90s, which is a huge deal. We talked about it earlier with Shadow, but having your own name in the title is like a status symbol that you're important to the Sonic series, and without Tails, it just would not be the same. He's the brain to Sonic's brawn, and is always trying to invent the coolest new piece of tech to help Sonic out. And of course, Sonic appears the most out of any other characters in the series, who would have thought?
Out of all the games in the series, I think there are only 6 games that you don't get to play as Sonic in some shape or form. But if he's not playable, he's usually mentioned or referenced in some way, shape, or form. He was at the top of his game back in the 90s and early 2000s, but then the series crashed with the poor quality control that was given to Heroes, Shadow 05, and especially Sonic 06. His games have been on a continuous roller coaster of good and bad ever since. But I cannot help but come back to this series and this character literally any chance I get. I love his games, and I think in a way, Sonic as a character has shaped me to become the man I am today. Wow, so that was a lot of characters to talk about. I bet you didn't think there were that many, and I certainly didn't when I first started this video. If I missed any, just leave a comment letting me know and I'll make sure to leave a pinned comment about it. Also, I'll be leaving a link to a Google Sheet to show which characters are from which games so you guys can check out my work and make sure I did a good job. With that, I really don't have anything else to say, so don't forget to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. I hope you have a great day, everyone. Peace.